This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
After 8 years, we've entered the next phase of this Prime Minister's economic misery. We've seen just inflation, and today we learn Canada's in a state of stagflation, as our economy shrunk by 1.1% in the most recent quarter, while the American economy boomed at 5%. Wow. Mr. Speaker, this is the result of high taxes, big deficits, and crippling red tape. At the same time as the prices rise for Canadians, their wages are falling down. The economy is now smaller than it was on a per capita basis 5 years ago. Why is it that the American economy is roaring while this Prime Minister's economy is snoring?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, despite the trite rhymes coming from the other side of the House, I'd like to remind everybody in this House that we actually have an economic plan, unlike the opposition. Our GDP today, Mr. Speaker, is at 4.1% above pre-pandemic levels. That is higher than Italy, the European Union, France, and Germany, Mr. Speaker, and the IMF projects that Canada will have the highest economic growth in the G7 in 2024. Mr. Speaker, that's an economic plan at work.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, the economy is smaller today than it was 5 years ago on a per capita basis, and the IMF projects Canada will have the worst economic growth over the next 6 years and the next 40 years. This is the result of high tax hypocrisy. The Environment Minister, it now comes out after he punishes single moms and small business owners and farmers for heating their homes and driving their vehicles. He has flown 60,000 kilometers. His climate change chair has flown the equivalent of going around the world 4 times, and now they're off with 70,000 other people at a air-conditioned dome in the desert in a petro state, Mr. Speaker. Why won't they park the jet, end the hypocrisy, and axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, there is one number that the Conservative leader will not talk about, Mr. Speaker, is that Canada ranked 3rd in the world for foreign direct investment. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, just yesterday, Dow Chemical announced one of its largest investment in 126 years in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, Mr. Speaker. This is going to be thousands of jobs, hundreds of thousands of hours of construction, Mr. Speaker. This is how you lead the economy. This is how you lead a country. This is how do you lead to bring investment in this country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I think he wants to lead the party, Mr. Speaker. While his Prime Minister leads the economy into a ditch, the high tax hypocrisy knows no bounds. Now First Nations are speaking up. First it was revolting Liberal MPs who were worried about losing their seats because of the Prime Minister's tax on home heat. Then it was other premiers refusing to collect the tax. Then it was farmers fighting for their ability to produce food without taxes. And now First Nations, over 100 First Nations communities have taken this government to court because they're violating the rights of our First People with the carbon tax on rural and remote people. When will they stop violating the constitutional rights of First Nations and axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, they're not our First People, but they are our First Nations, which are independent First Nations. And, Mr. Speaker, this government from no, they're not. Listen to that, Mr. Speaker. The colonialism in this place from the Conservatives just won't quit. I will say, Mr. Speaker, that we respect First Nations on this side. We know that they're leaders. That's why we've invested hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars in First Nations to ensure equity in water, in child welfare, and in housing, and we'll continue, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
In an interview with CFRA's Bill Carroll, Dr. Barry Dworkin reported the case of a United Kingdom doctor who came to Canada fully qualified and ready to practice, but denied the ability to take a work permit simply because she was self-employed, an obvious paperwork snafu. She joins the 20,000 immigrants to Canada who are doctors that can't work, 32,000 nurses. Why won't the government take my common sense plan to bring in a blue seal professional standard that will allow immigrant doctors, nurses, and other professionals to quickly prove they are qualified, get to work, earning powerful paychecks, serving patients in need?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member across for the good question. We are working in partnership with the Ontario government to help reestablish all the foreign doctors, making sure that they can get accredited. Thank you so much for the question.
Honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you very much. The reality is the more this government spends, the poorer Canadians get. Over the last 8 years, this government has imposed a record tax burden on Canadians, levels of debt and deficits never seen before in this country, and the result is the worst per capita growth rate since the Great Depression. Record food bank usage, 2 million Canadians going to food bank every month. Why are these Liberals so hell-bent to bankrupt Canadians?